Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's hybrid New York City Council meeting of the Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchise. Please place electronic devices to vibrate or silent. If you wish to submit testimony, you may send it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Again, that's landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you for your cooperation. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Good afternoon, and welcome to a meeting of the Subcommittee of Zoning and Franchises. I am Councilmember Kevin Riley, Chair of the Subcommittee. This afternoon, I am joined in the chambers by Councilmember Moyer, Chair Lewis, Councilmember Bacha, and Councilmember Hanks. Today, we will vote on one rezoning proposal for 1810 Randall Avenue in the Bronx that the subcommittee will hear today. We will also hold public hearings for three rezoning proposals, one in my district in the Bronx for 1959 Strang Avenue, and two in Queens for 231-06 Northern Boulevard and Hallett's North. Before we begin, I recognize the subcommittee counsel to review the hearing procedures.
Thank you, Chair Riley. This meeting is being held in hybrid format. Members of the subcommittee are required to meet in person. Members of the public who wish to testify may do so in person or via Zoom. Members of the public wishing to testify remotely were asked to register for today's hearings. If you wish to testify and have not already registered, please do so now by visiting the New York City Council website at www.council.nyc.gov/land use to sign up. Members of the public may also view a live stream broadcast of this meeting at the Council's website. If you need an accessible version of any of the presentations shown today, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. When called to testify, individuals appearing before the subcommittee will remain muted until recognized by the chair. Applicant teams will be recognized as a group and called first, followed by members of the public. When the chair recognizes you, if you are joining us remotely, your microphone will be unmuted. Please take a moment to check your device and confirm that your mic is on before you begin speaking. Public testimony will be limited to 2 minutes per witness. If you have additional testimony you would like the subcommittee to consider, or if you have written testimony to submit instead of appearing here before the subcommittee, you may email it to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. Please indicate the LU number or the project name in the subject line of your email. Witnesses joining remotely are requested to remain in the meeting until excused by the chair, as council members may have questions. Finally, there will be pauses over the course of this hybrid meeting for various technical reasons, and we ask that you please be patient as we work through any issues. Chair Riley will now continue with today's agenda items.
Thank you, Council, and I just want to state for the record, we've been joined by Councilmember Carr and Councilmember Abreu. I will now open the public hearing on preconsiders LU C220203 ZMX and N220204 ZRX relating to the 1810 Randall Avenue rezoning proposal in Councilmember Faria's district in the Bronx. This application seeks a zoning map amendment to rezone existing R4/C1-2 and an R5/C1-2 zoning district to an R6/C1-2 zoning district and a related zoning text amendment to establish an MIH program area. For anyone wishing to testify on this item remotely, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the Council's website at council.nyc.gov/land use. Councilmember Farias is unable to join us today, but sent a statement in support that I would like to read on the record on her behalf. I have been working closely with all parties involved in this project since November of 2021, including the developer, the church, and the greater community to ensure the members of the church have a leading role in the process and there is a direct benefit to the needs of the district. I am proud to say we have come to this place in the development and city planning process because of the direct work with several informational sessions, outreach and education to neighbors in the surrounding area, and additional community benefit requests fulfilled. I feel confident in moving this project forward through the city planning approval process. This will be 100% affordable senior housing through the SARA program with a rolling voucher for every unit. And I have allocated $1.5 million from my capital budget for the FY 2023 to ensure the groundbreaking of this project occurs in 2022. I want everyone voting on this project today to know how important and necessary senior and affordable housing is to my district, and my office has worked hard to ensure that this development is equitable by and for the community it will be serving. Because of this, I urge all of my colleagues to vote yes on the 1810 Randall Avenue project. That ends Councilmember Faria's statement. Council, please call the first panel for this item.
The applicant panel for this item will include Jacqueline Scarinci, Leon Hovsepian, and participating remotely, Geraldine Diaz. Applicants, please raise your right hands. I'll ask each of you in turn by name. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that you will answer all questions by council members truthfully? Ms. Scarinci. Leon Hovsepian. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Geraldine Diaz.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, as you begin, I'll just ask that you please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Riley and members of the Zoning and Franchises Subcommittee. My name is Jacqueline Scarinci of Ackerman LLP, Land Use Counsel for the applicants, which are comprised of the owner, the Casa de la Fe Church, and also Vertical Community Developers, the developer of the project. I'm joined here this afternoon with Leon Hovsepian, the Vice President of Vertical Community Developers, and we're here to present the proposed rezoning of the property known as 1810 Randall Avenue, which will facilitate the redevelopment of a site with new mixed building of senior affordable housing and bring back the current church, Casa de la Fe, House of Faith. So our presentation, can you see our presentation, or I'm sorry, okay. Next slide, please. The project site is comprised of 3 tax lots that encompass the entire block front on Randall Avenue between Beach and Taylor. This is just west of the major intersection of Soundview and Randall Avenue, which are wide zoning streets. The project site is a rectangular zoning lot with 200 feet of frontage on Randall and then 100 feet on both Beach and Taylor. The sites are currently zoned R4 and R5A, and there are 6- and 7-story buildings located 2 blocks west of the site in the NYCHA Soundview houses, as well as a number of higher density buildings just outside of the 600-foot radius that you see here. The project site has access to a number of bus lines in the area, with a bus stop for the BX27 directly in front of the site, and it has access to the BX5, BX39, and BX36 bus lines. Next slide, please. As you can see from the existing conditions today, the site is improved with the Casa de la Fe Church, which is currently, it was a converted theater, so it is in need of upgrading to provide the classroom and programming space that the church needs to carry out their mission. And also, Casa de la Fe has a significant presence in the community, but is in need of rehabilitating this space. And there's also an unimproved parking lot on the site today. Next slide, please. The applicant team has been engaging with Community Board 9 and Councilmember Farias on this project, as you heard in her statement, and this project is able to hit on a number of the major Community District 9 needs, which include affordable housing, senior services, public safety, youth and children's services, because the church provides much-needed affordable enrichment programs for our children, and neighborhood preservation by providing avoiding displacement of residential units. There's currently no residential use on the site today. Next slide, please. Here's the proposed development overview. We're proposing a new 8-story mixed-use residential and community facility development that will have approximately 86,000 square feet of residential floor area, 167 senior affordable housing units that's intended to be financed through HPD's SARA term sheet, a new and improved house of worship for community center for the Casa de la Fe Church, which will be approximately 12,000 square feet, and 16 accessory parking spaces. Next slide, please. We're requesting 2 zoning and land use actions, a zoning map amendment from the existing R4A C12 and R5 C12 zoning districts to an R6 C12 zoning district, and a zoning text amendment to establish a mandatory inclusionary housing area over the project area. Next slide, please. It's just an image of the site plan. Next slide, please. This is a new rendering of the mixed-use development with the Casa de la Fe on the corner of Beach and Randall Avenue. Next slide, please. And now I'll turn it over to Leon to get into more of the specifics regarding the senior affordable housing component of the project.
Thank you, Jackie. So Vertical Community Development is looking forward to continuing its relationship in partnership with Casa de la Fe Church to redevelop the property and bring much needed senior affordable housing to the Bronx, and more specifically to the Soundview community. The proposed rezoning will facilitate the development of approximately 167 units of housing, 100% affordable for seniors, of which 25 to 30% will be permanently affordable under the mandatory inclusionary housing program, and all of which will be subject to an HPD regulatory agreement with a term of 30 years at a minimum, potentially up to 60 years. We anticipate that the project will be funded using the SARA program, as we mentioned, which is designed for seniors 62 years and older. SARA permits a maximum income level of 60% area median income, but also permits federal vouchers, which are restricted to 50% area median income. Based on the 2022 HUD income limits, household incomes must be between 0 and $53,400 for up to a 2-person household to qualify for a unit. The SARA term sheet also provides for a mix of studio and 1-bedroom units. This slide shows the current unit distribution for the project based on HPD's current term sheet. The SARA term sheet provides for 30% of the units to be used for homeless and formerly homeless individuals, utilizing some of the studio units. We will continue our conversation with our partners at HPD regarding the proposed unit distribution for the project and to further explore whether changes are needed. With that, back to Jackie.
So just to kind of give an overview, the project received approval at the community board and the borough president, and also received approval from the city planning commission, and now we're here before the zoning and franchises subcommittee, and if you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just 2 questions really quick, and I'll see if my colleagues have any questions. I just want to announce we've been joined by Councilmember Caban as well. How long is the term for the regulatory agreement for the affordable units that will be covered in the SARA term sheet and are not subjected to the MIH? And what would be expected when the term expires?
Sure. So the SARA program will require a minimum of 30 30-year regulatory agreement, but the tax exemption usually is a longer period. It's a 60-year period.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Min-
Do you wanna
minimum
speak?
of 40 and usually 60 years, depending on which tax exemption is used. So minimum of 60 years. A portion of that obviously is permanently affordable with the MIH, and most frequently those get rolled into a new regulatory agreement, a rehab, and a new regulatory agreement after that period of time, but that's beyond our horizon to see.
Thank you. And the Borough President Gibson has discussed the need for larger unit sizes. Can you discuss what factors your team contemplated when deciding both on the unit mix and the square footage for each unit?
Do you want me to take it? Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Sure. So there are a lot of considerations, obviously, and affordable housing. My background is HPD, so I worked there for many years, for 7 years, previous to coming to vertical community development. So one of the goals is obviously to create as much affordable housing as possible. One of the restrictions in the term sheet limits unit sizes to be within a band. So we're designing our units to be term sheet compliant, which we have to do based on HPD's requirements. And that enables more units to be created. So we have a mix of studios and one-bedrooms that are permitted, and we do have more studios currently, but that's really to get as many units and provide for as many households as possible.
Thank you. I'll now invite my colleagues to ask any questions. Anybody has any questions? All right. There being no questions for this applicant panel, this panel is excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on the 1810 Randall Avenue proposal?
Chair, we will just check with our remote production team to make sure that there are no remote witnesses. If there are any members of the public who wish to testify remotely on the 1810 Randall Avenue proposal, please use the raise hand button now. And if there are any persons in the committee room who wish to testify on this item, please come forward, fill out a speaker card, and make yourselves known. We will stand at ease briefly while we check for remote witnesses.
There being no other members of the public who wish to testify on preconsidered LUs related to the ULURP number C220203ZMX and the N220204ZRX relating to the 1810 Randall Avenue rezoning proposal, the public hearing is now closed. Thank you, Council. Today we will vote to approve preconsidered LUs related to ULURP numbers C220203 ZMX and N220204 ZRX relating to the 1810 Randall Avenue rezoning proposal in Councilmember Farias District in the Bronx. As we just heard, the proposal will rezone the R4/C1-2 and the R5/C1-2 zoning district to an R6/C1-2 zoning district and establish an MIH program area utilizing MIH option 1 and 2. These approvals would facilitate the development of a new 8-story mixed-use building with upgraded facilities for the Casa de la Fe. Councilmember Farias is in support of this proposal. Are there any council members with questions or remarks at this time? There being no council members, I will now call for a vote to approve preconsidered LUs relating to ULURPs number C220203 ZMX and N220204 ZRX relating to the 1810 Randall Avenue rezoning proposal. Council, please call the roll.
Chair Riley.
Aye.
Councilmember Moya.
I vote aye.
Councilmember Lewis. Councilmember Abreu.
Aye.
Councilmember Botcher.
Aye.
Councilmember Hanks. Aye. Councilmember Carr.
Aye.
A vote of 7 in the affirmative, 0 in the negative, and no abstentions. The items are approved and referred to the full Land Use Committee.
Thank you, Council. To continue with today's meeting, I will now open the public hearing on preconsidered LUs relating to the ULURP number C220171 ZMX, relating to the 1959 Strang Avenue rezoning proposal in my district in the Bronx. This application seeks a zoning map amendment to map a C2-3 overlay over within an existing R4 district. For anyone wishing to testify on this item remotely, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/land-use. Council, please call the first panel for this item.
The applicant panel for this item will include Mr. Eric Palatnik. Mr. Palatnik, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in answer to all council member questions?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov, and now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, as you begin, I'll just ask you to please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Sure. My name is Eric Palatnik, and I'm representing 1959 Strang Avenue, Wharton Properties, and I would like to thank all of you for bringing back in-person meetings. I would not like to thank you for bringing back a mask, and I'd like to thank you for doing away with ties. So now that I've said all of that, I'd like to introduce this application, which I don't know if you could see on the screen or if you have a copy of it, but it's in Councilmember Riley's district. It's a very small rezoning application in an R4 district to allow a commercial overlay to extend from the shopping center that you see in the foreground there to the site. And the site has been improved upon with a diner for the better part of the last 75 years. Councilmember Riley, I think, knows it very well. It sat dormant for the past decade. It was operating under a BSA variance. The BSA refused to reinstate the variance 6 years ago when we asked them, and forced us to come for a rezoning. So if you want to understand how things worked in New York City for the past 5 years, that's why it's taken us 5 years to get here. They could have acted on it relatively quickly, but we were forced to come through a rezoning. So we're here now for the rezoning, and we have the unanimous support of Community Board 11. We've worked with them for the past few years, and they support it unanimously, as well as Borough President Vanessa Gibson. So having said that, I'd ask whoever's controlling the screen if you could just click to a picture of the site, and you could, folks who are taking a look at it online could see the property. And it's an existing diner in an R4 district. If you can click forward a few slides, we can go to some pictures. You can pause there. This is a picture of what it will look like, and I think, I hope Councilmember Riley's happy with it. Looks much better than what it looks like right now. It has a signed lease for Bank of America in one of the retail spaces. The other space is vacant and not yet tenanted, but we are actively pursuing tenants, and we've made a commitment to the community that we will not allow schmutz to come into the space. That's a zoning term, a Yiddish zoning term for nothing that's schlock or not desirable by the community. They wanted to see a high quality tenant in place here. They did not want to see vape shops, and we have made a commitment to them that we will find a high quality tenant. You will not see a laundromat, you will not there's anything wrong with it, nor will you see a vape shop, but we'll try to find uses, and we made that commitment to you. It'll be well landscaped. We've also designed it to around the bus stop, which in the image there is on the left side of the front of the building, and the parking lot wraps around the rear. It's a very straightforward application. I don't know if I need to go much further on the presentation unless anybody would like to hear anything or see anything in specific, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm very pleased that this application is going through. This has been an eyesore in the district for over a decade, you can imagine. And also you're addressing the banking issue that we have in the area. A lot of the banks, which is happening in a lot of communities of color, they're like picking up and going. And the fact that you guys already made an investment and have Bank of America coming to the community, I think that's really great. And I know the Community Board 12 is really appreciative of it. I just have a few questions. Given the need for more housing citywide, can your team explain why you did not seek a rezoning which could increase housing density while proposing this commercial overlay?
Nobody ever suggested that to us before, that they might want to see more housing over there. So I think that's the main reason. And when we started bringing the application years ago, because of the way that it came about, it really was focused on a commercial component to it. I wish we would have spoken to you a few years ago and got that idea in our head, because we probably would have pursued that.
Does your team have commercial tenants picked out for the new space? What type of commercial use does your team envision at this site, and how will these services benefit the surrounding community?
And as we've just spoken about, I think you made it quite clear that the bank is of value to the community and something that you'd like to see in the area. Also, I've made mention before that the community board, and I apologize, I mentioned community board 11, it's community board 12, you corrected me, asked for us to have a high-quality tenant in the remaining space, and we're going to endeavor to do that and try to find a use there that everybody could be proud of.
And Eric, speaking of the second space, would the applicant be willing to work with me and the community to seek a needed community service provider for the second commercial space, like a daycare, a small daycare, or a community organization that would benefit?
Bring it on. It's post-COVID retail space. We're happy to see any use that you feel is important that you want to bring to us. We'd love to meet with you about and introduce to the owners.
Thank you. And is there a commitment to beautifying the sidewalk area on this lot with street trees or the urban design elements?
Yes, as a requirement of the builder's pavement plan, there will be a requirement to plant street trees where there are design guidelines based upon the location of the bus stop. We cannot impede upon the waiting area for the bus stop, but we will be planting street trees.
Thank you, Eric. That's all the questions I have. I now invite my colleagues to ask any questions if they have. There being no further questions for this applicant panel, this panel is excused.
Thank you.
Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on 1959 Strang Avenue proposal remotely or in person?
Once again, if there are any members of the public in the committee room who wish to testify on this item, please make yourselves known and present a speaker card. Mr. Chair, no members of the public in the room, and we have no members of the public testifying remotely.
Thank you, Council. There being no members of the public who wish to testify on the preconsidered LUs relating to the ULURP number C220171ZMX relating to the 1959 Strang Avenue rezoning proposal. The public hearing is now closed and the item is laid over. To continue with today's meeting, I will now open the public hearing on preconsidered LUs relating to the ULURP number C239394ZMQ relating to the 231-06 Northern Boulevard rezoning proposal in Councilmember Palladino's district in Queens. This application seeks a zoning map amendment to map a C2-2 overlay within an existing R1-2 zoning district. For anyone wishing to testify on this item remotely, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/land-use. Council, please call the first panel for this item.
The applicant panel for this item will include Frank St. Jacques. Mr. St. Jacques, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before the subcommittee and in answer to all council member questions? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. For the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant team may begin. Panelists, as you begin, I'll just ask that you please reinstate your name and organization for the record. You may begin.
Thank you, Chair Riley. Do you have a slide presentation? Would it be possible to load that? Great, thank you. Next slide, please. Good afternoon, Chair Riley and subcommittee members. I'm Frank St. Jacques with Ackerman LLP. We are Land Use Council on this zoning map amendment to establish a C22 commercial overlay within the existing R12 district on a portion of Northern Boulevard in Queens Community District 11. We represent the applicant property owner who operates the Mizumi restaurant that is within the rezoning area. The proposed commercial overlay would allow commercial use subject to the use, bulk, and parking regulations of the zoning resolution, and it would facilitate the enlargement of Mizumi Restaurant, which is a family-owned, multi-generational small business that has served the community since about 2010. Next slide, please. The proposed rezoning area is outlined in yellow on this map and was zoned R12 for residential use back in 1961. However, there is no residential use, only commercial use within the proposed rezoning area. The Mizumi site on the left-hand side of the proposed rezoning area is outlined in red. Next slide, please. All of the properties in the rezoning area, as well as some to the north and east, are commercial uses, which were permitted by use variances from the Board of Standards and Appeals, or BSA, over several decades because the R12 residential district does not allow commercial use as of right. Next slide, please. This slide shows the existing site conditions. The site itself in total is about 69,000 square feet. As we noted, it was zoned R12 back in 1961, and there's been restaurant use at the site since around 1976 by BSA variance. Mizumi began operating in 2010 after receiving a new BSA variance approval, and they seek to expand into the approximately 19,000 square foot vacant portion of the site, which is shown in the diagram on the left-hand side of the slide, that was previously used as a gas station. Next slide, please. This zoning change map shows the existing R12 zoning district on the left and the proposed C22 commercial overlay with the R12 underlying zoning remaining in place shown on the right. The proposed overlay affects the Mizumi site and 4 other properties to the east, as outlined on the zoning change map. Next slide, please. To provide some context for the proposed commercial overlay, this map shows that there are commercial overlays along nearly all of Northern Boulevard at the eastern edge of Community District 11. The area where there's not commercial overlays is almost entirely commercial by way of 9 variances that are shown here with red dots, including all of the properties in the rezoning area and several others to the north and east. The goal of this application is to bring the zoning in line with the existing conditions on this strip of Northern Boulevard. Next slide, please. The proposed overlay represents cohesive planning to address this strip of non-conforming commercial uses. We'll note that the high parking requirement in the C22 overlay of 1 space per 300 square feet of floor area effectively limits the ability to fully utilize the available commercial FAR. Also note that multifamily and hotel uses are not permitted as the existing R12 zoning remains in place. Next slide, please. The proposed enlargement is shown here on the right next to the existing building on the left. The building is raised to comply with flood resiliency requirements pursuant to the building code and provide additional parking. The site will also have extensive stormwater management per a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation wetlands permit. Next slide, please. Finally, we acknowledge Community Board 11's concerns with this application, but submit that several of their concerns are not triggered by this project and that the proposed commercial overlay will ultimately benefit the community with comprehensive zoning versus the current patchwork of BSA variances. The rezoning provides certainty and encourages investment, allows property owners to obtain financing and when they do not have to return to the BSA for extensions of the existing use variances. We'll also note that this rezoning is in line with the community's own 197A plan, which sought to allow commercial development on this strip of Northern Boulevard by adding an overlay while retaining the low-density R12 residential zoning. This is exactly what we're asking the council to consider today. And with that, I'll close the presentation and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for this applicant team. What led you to conclude that the BSA variance was unlikely to be granted for the proposed project?
So as you noted, the Mizumi originally pursued a BSA variance for the same enlargement that's presented here today. The community board had recommended approval of that enlargement by variance, but after years of submissions to the BSA and hearings, we received indication from the BSA that they're unlikely that a variance would be granted, and Mizumi withdrew that application and sought the rezoning. Despite whatever community support Mizumi may have had then and now, BSA variances are an extremely difficult process. They're subject to 5 findings that require extensive support with different professionals, economic analysis, environmental analysis. So after many years of pursuing the BSA variance and receiving that indication that it was unlikely to be approved, that's when Mizumi determined that they would move forward with a rezoning rather than a BSA variance.
Thank you. What will most likely happen to the development site and other vacant sites in the rezoning area if this application were to be disapproved?
Sorry, were to be disapproved?
Yes, correct.
Well, I think the status quo would remain. The existing vacant parcel that's a part of the development site that was a former gas station, no development really could occur there, although the site is zoned for R12 residential use. R12 is an extremely low-density residential district that only allows single-family homes, so detached homes. It's also the site that was previously had a gas station on it, so there was previously extensive contamination. Mizumi has performed a significant amount of cleanup there, but the current Department of Environmental Conservation spill that's been opened in connection with the gas station site, the cleanup there, could not be closed, and essentially, nothing would happen. And this is similar for the other sites within the proposed rezoning area. Essentially, the zoning is such that it's in such contrast with the R12 zoning is in such contrast with what's actually there at all these sites that nothing can occur without further discretionary action.
Can you describe the design features of the proposed development that will address environmental concerns about the storm water runoff and the flood resiliency, especially the expanding parking lot?
Sure. So as part of, I'll take a step back and note that this strip of Northern Boulevard is adjacent to Alley Pond Park, which is a protected wetland area. None of the property is actually within the wetland area, but it's close enough to it that it necessitates oversight and ultimately permitting by state DEC. So as part of any development on the Mizumi site requires a wetlands permit. In the context of the BSA variance, Mizumi went ahead and got that wetlands permit and designed a really significant stormwater retention system that includes about a 140,000 gallon detention tank that's underneath the parking lot, as well as bioretention planters. So the gas station, the former gas station part of the site is capped to avoid any contamination into Alley Pond Park, but any stormwater is captured in bioretention planters and ultimately detained and then cleaned and recharged into the groundwater via very extensive stormwater controls.
Thank you. And have you considered any revisions to the planned development in response to the community concerns?
We have considered certain changes to the programming of the proposed enlargement, potentially with a reduction of floor area, but we're still working on what potentially would be amenable to the community and the local council member. That's an ongoing discussion, and we hope ultimately to earn the council members' support through some change to the proposed project.
Thank you. I now invite my colleagues to ask any questions. There being no questions for this applicant panel, this panel is excused. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on 231-06 Northern Boulevard proposal?
Is Kenneth Chiang available to testify remotely?
Yes, that's me. Hi, my name is Kenneth Chiang. This is with my father, Edward. Hi. We are the owners and applicants of Mizumi Restaurant and zoning application. We've been in this business, well, I'm a third generation restaurateur. My father's been a restaurateur, his father's been a restaurateur, and we plan to continue to serve our community that we're in. And it's, I believe it's a modest request for us to expand. We've struggled during the pandemic. There have been a lot of restrictions. And I think this is an opportunity for us as a business and as members of the community to improve the site and continue to serve the community that we've been serving and loving, supporting for all these years and hopefully the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chang. And can you just clarify, did you say that you guys are the owners?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, we'll just check with our remote production team to make sure that there are, okay, we have one additional witness participating remotely. Once again, for anyone here with us today wishing to testify, please see a sergeant-at-arms and fill out a speaker card. The next speaker, the next witness on this, in this hearing will be Tom Gresh.
Starting time.
Good afternoon. Can you folks hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Tom. Tom?
Hi, can you folks hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be able to make a statement to the Subcommittee on Zoning and Franchises regarding the project Mizumi on Northern Boulevard. The Queens Chamber of Commerce wholeheartedly endorses this change due to the fact as this borough enters a post-pandemic mode, we need all the small businesses and all the jobs we can muster. So again, the Queens Chamber of Commerce wholeheartedly supports this effort to support the restaurant on Northern Boulevard. I yield my time to anybody else who wants to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no other members of the public who wish to testify on preconsidered LUs relating to ULUP numbers C 210394 ZMQ relating to the 231-06 Northern Boulevard rezoning proposal. The public hearing is now closed and the items are laid over. I will now open the public hearing on preconsidered LUs relating to the ULUP number C220196 ZMQ and N220197 ZRQ relating to the Hallett's North rezoning proposal in Councilmember Caban's district in Queens. This application seeks a zoning map amendment to rezone an existing M1-1 zoning district to an R7-3/C2-4 zoning district and a related zoning text amendment to establish an MIH program area to facilitate a mixed-use development with 1,400 units of housing. For anyone wishing to testify on this item remotely, if you have not already done so, you must register online, and you may do that now by visiting the council's website at council.nyc.gov/land use. I would now like to allow Councilmember Caban to give any remarks regarding this project. Councilmember Caban.
Thank you, Chair Riley, and thank you for holding this important hearing. I'm excited that we're finally at the council review stage for the Hallett's North project in my district. This project has been around for many years, and I'm grateful to the constituents and community leaders who participated in the many scoping sessions and public meetings through the years, and to the applicant for making a number of adjustments along the way. I want to start at the outset by saying that I have been and will continue to be critical of using developer-driven MIH rezonings as our only affordable housing creation strategy. In neighborhoods like Astoria, we have outsourced the responsibility of building affordable units almost entirely to the private sector, and yet wonder why folks have such strong skepticism around development generally and rezoning specifically. And if signing off on MIH projects is all New Yorkers see us doing to solve the affordable housing crisis in our city, then we've really failed. It's the city, state, and federal government's job to develop new tools to build and preserve low-income housing and fight against displacement. Mandatory inclusionary housing is one such tool, but it is not, by a long shot, sufficient to address our city's crisis. MIH is an important way to ensure that private development contributes to community needs, but for-profit development will never produce the scale or quality of housing that our lowest income neighbors need and deserve. and the city must pursue additional tools and strategies, comprehensive planning, ensuring that new housing and affordable housing is fairly distributed throughout the city, a citywide land bank, a new shared equity homeownership program, and put real funding behind them. I was really distressed that in the FY23 adopted budget, that it cut our housing budget, and by recent reports that HPD lacks the staff resources to accelerate new production and preservation of affordable housing, especially at a time of such instability. But even as we fight for the creation of new tools and strategies, some like comprehensive planning that will take many years to develop, I think it would be irresponsible to not utilize the tools we do have now. So in spite of the limitations inherent in the city's land use process, I've engaged in this process and evaluated the project alongside my constituents, eager to answer the following questions. Given the project's proximity to NYCHA housing, can we maximize the number of units at deep affordability levels so that my neighbors in public housing can live there? Will the waterfront access be truly public, welcoming, and without unnecessary and unjust surveillance? And does the peninsula have the infrastructure needed to support these changes? It's important to note that the Hallett's Peninsula has not been an active, working waterfront for a long time, and absent any zoning changes, the land would have remained underutilized and polluted. Previous administrations and city councils have already approved over 4,000 units of future housing on the Hallett's Peninsula, along with new waterfront access designs, commercial space, schools, and community facilities. And so this project before us, when evaluated alongside what's already been approved on the peninsula, certainly fits within that vision. But concerns around affordability and infrastructure remain, and I'm looking forward to digging in on those details today, so thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Caban. Council, please call the first panel for this item.
The applicant panel for this item will include Rob Huberman, Jay Valgora, Ken Smith, joining us in the room, and joining remotely, Jason Diaz.
Council, please administer the affirmation.
I'll ask each of you in turn, including Jason Diaz, to answer the following. Please raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and that you will answer all council member questions truthfully? Mr. Huberman. Mr. Valgora. Ken Smith. Jason Diaz.
Do.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the viewing public, if you need an accessible version of this presentation, please send an email request to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. And now the applicant panel may begin. Please remember to reinstate your name and organization for the record before you begin. You may begin.
Sorry about that. We're here on behalf of the applicant for the Hallett's North project, which is an exciting new project that is proposed to be developed on the Hallett's Peninsula in Astoria, Queens. Next slide, please. So this is just a rendering facing southeast, just so you could see. And it's from the public open waterfront park that is proposed on the development, which we'll go into some detail in this presentation. Next slide, please. And this is the consultant team that's been working on this project diligently for the past 3+ years. Just wanted to acknowledge them. Next slide, please. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see that, but if not, so there is significant community support for this project, and that is due to the project goals and the community benefits that are going to go hand in hand with the development. One of the first project goals and community benefits will be resiliency. Where there's going to be major enhancement to resiliency here. We're going to raise the site 9 feet, which is more than is required, and that will prevent coastal flooding, not only on the site, but also in the surrounding community because it's being lifted up so much, and Jay can get into that a little later. In terms of sustainability, the applicant is seeking LEED Silver certification for the building, and they're looking into geothermal energy, which we'll also get into a little bit later, which should help reduce reliance on fossil fuel use. One of the biggest assets to this project is the public space, which Ken Smith and his team have designed, It's going to be a beautiful space. It's going to be about 1.1 acres, which is about 30% more than is required under zoning. It will be open to the public. It's going to be a beautiful waterfront park. We will be, aside from what we're saying, the applicant is entering into a restrictive declaration and a maintenance agreement with the Parks Department, which will ensure that the park will be maintained and will be open to the public. The next biggest asset that we're providing is about 335 affordable units. So the applicant is pursuing MIH option 1 here. They have since the beginning of the project, and there will be no subsidies being sought from HPD, so that should help expedite things. So 335 units is going to be great for the local community. And finally, economic opportunity and education. We're looking at about 500 jobs that are going to be created, where the applicant is partnered with Zone 126 and Urban Upbound. There's about 20,000 square feet of community facility space that has been allocated to this development. So we've been working very closely with them to help find them a space for their programming. There's also a healthcare provider that we've been speaking with, and that would all go into the community facility space as well. Next slide, please. So there's been significant community engagement and outreach even before this application was submitted. Over 3 years of community engagement, including 4 meetings with the community board, meetings with the Astoria Houses Tenant Association. There were focus groups with Astoria Houses residents. There's been a lot. And what's at the bottom of this slide, we believe rings true. We have made what we have heard a priority. It's really been a very collegiate, cooperative process all throughout. And because of that, we're happy to report that we've received community board approval, borough president approval with some conditions, and most recently, city planning commission approval for this project. So I think that's in no small part due to the amount of engagement that there has been on this project. Next slide, please. So now I'm just going to quickly run through the proposed zoning actions. It's what we're here for today. These are what we're seeking approval on. So this is a rezoning. It's a rezoning from an M11 manufacturing district to an R73C24. And with the R73C24 zoning comes the next bullet, which is the zoning text amendment to map an MIH option 1 area here. Next is a waterfront special permit, which will waive certain height setback, tower size regulations. This is directly connected to not only the design of the building, but also the design of the waterfront plaza, the waterfront open area, and the limited and narrow layout of the site itself. It's kind of a flag-shaped lot, so certain waivers were required for that. The next 3 really kind of go together. Waterfront authorizations to help modify little bits and pieces of the waterfront area using boulders instead of bollards and things like that, little grass area modifications, things like that. And a waterfront authorization for phased development. So the waterfront will be developed in phases because the project is so large, but the vast majority of the waterfront will be developed in the first phase. A waterfront certification, which is always required whenever you're building something on the waterfront from city planning, and an amendment to the city map to demap a portion of 3rd Street extending from 26th Avenue. So currently 3rd Street is a mapped street. It's privately owned and it's unimproved. It's basically just dirt and maybe little bits of grass. And through this project, we're going to demap the street and it will become an upland connection from 26th Avenue to the waterfront, and it will allow the public access to the waterfront. So next slide, and I'm going to turn things over now to Jay Valgora.
Thank you, Rob. My name is Jay Valgora. I'm the founder and principal of Studio V Architecture. I'll be presenting this, and Ken Smith, I think, will jump in with me because we've worked together on this project. I want to say it's been a privilege for me to have had the opportunity to do my best to work with this community for over 16 years. I don't pretend to have the depth of knowledge of our council member or other people, but we've tried hard to engage this community in some of the other projects and benefits raised, including parks and schools. We're proud that we had our small role in helping advocate for that, and we look forward to the input of the council as we see how we can help make this project the best that it could be. Next slide. So we'll take you into the design briefly, and here you can see the site. It's on the northern side of the Hallett's Peninsula, So you can see it's this kind of L-shaped site at 3rd Street and 26th Avenue. And you can see that it's really kind of separate from much of the surrounding neighborhood and yet very much a part also of the Astoria Houses campus, and it occupies a prominent position on the waterfront. Next. This shows what to me is one of the most important things, which is this has the opportunity to create one of the great missing links to really fulfill that and correct one of the missing links in the entire Astoria waterfront. We've advocated tirelessly in order to add additional open space and green space on the waterfront, and the Hallett's North development will be one of the last pieces in what could be a 2.5-mile continuous green waterfront all the way from Rainey Park to Astoria Park. There is one missing link next to it, which is the Visa site, which we've also advocated for, but that one's not yet coming forward. So it's a significant connection in the overall public realm. Next. This is kind of a view and plan of the community mostly as it is today. So you can see how the waterfront was mostly underutilized industrial spaces, as the councilwoman said, as well as the NYCHA campus, which actually exists on the southern portion, and how we're really working to try to integrate all of the upland and the perimeter and really create an entire community that's connected to its waterfront. In the next slide, you can see how it actually shows with the other projects that have been previously approved, Hallett's Point to the left, Astoria Cove to the upper right, certain projects with improvements such as public schools and affordable housing within the overall NYCHA campus. Next. But then the Hallett's North piece is a significant addition to that and really working to try to meet the needs of the community and knit together a sequence of public spaces, housing, streets, connectivity, and so forth. And so we'd like to take you into the detailed design and show you how it fits into this larger community, but how also specifically we've tried to create the best possible design here. Next. So here's a presentation on the building and landscape design, and we'll kind of just jump in. And maybe Ken, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Ken Smith. I'm the landscape architect on the project.
Next slide. So this is an overall view, and again, I'm just going to recap because I know Rob mentioned some of the overall facts, so just to kind of put them out there. But here you can see an aerial perspective showing its relationship really on the entire peninsula, as well as the East River. It's really a very significant site. And you can see how it kind of fits into the overall character and scale of the other proposed developments, but then we're going to take you into the special details of this one. So overall, the total floor area ratio requested is a 6.0. The total zoning floor area is approximately just under 1 million square feet, about 986,000. The retail area is relatively small because there's only a small portion suitable for retail, but a couple thousand square feet. Residential area is the majority, so it's mostly housing, 960. We're looking at present that the total number of units is around 1337, could vary slightly, and the affordable units about 335. And then there would be space for 510 parking spaces. So that's kind of a larger overview of the project as a whole. Next. Here you can see we worked really carefully with our colleagues at City Planning and also through extensive community meetings, which I like to do personally as the owner of my firm, to really try to sculpt the massing in order to create a highly articulated series of building envelopes and volumes that must be respected if the project is approved, which also include significant setbacks and even input fairly far along into the process where our client has really worked with us to make commitments and improvements throughout, including these significant setbacks at 3rd Street and moving the tower closest to the waterfront. Even though we have 30% extra open space, we even pushed that tower back a bit towards the end in order to respond to input that we received from the council and from city planning. Next. Now, resiliency is a key point, and I'm proud of how we address resiliency. I was actually appointed by the city council to the Waterfront Management Advisory Board. I believe I'm the only practicing architect in New York that had that honor, where we worked pro bono with the city to actually help create the 10-year plan. And as part of that, I like to live by the principles that we promote. And so we've tried to take extraordinary measures to take into account resiliency and climate change, including significant elevation to the site. But more than that, and I think it's key, we want to not only protect our site, but we would like to make improvements that benefit the greater community. So not only does the elevation prevent water from entering deeper into the peninsula, and the other projects will also help, but we would like to absorb stormwater, create kind of a sponge or a series of rain gardens that I know Ken will describe shortly, that actually really create softer edges, reinforce the waterfront, and actually allow us to collect and hold stormwater. So this is a very important part of our strategy and very important for the future of our waterfront. Next. Now this starts to show some of the stormwater collections, and maybe Ken, you want to speak to this a little bit too.
Yeah, this shows the sort of the major parts of the project. 3rd Street, which is the upland corridor that links the waterfront to the neighborhood, and we'll show you designs for that, which are really intended to be as welcoming and accessible as possible. We've worked very hard to actually wrap the waterfront to the south to actually shorten the distance from the neighborhood to increase its welcoming quality. And we've also developed a series of infiltration gardens, what we call the oyster gardens, as well as active recreation.
Next slide.
This shows the emphasis on stormwater infiltration. The two major strategies are to lift up the site to deal with storm surge, to protect the neighborhood, and then to actually infiltrate as much stormwater as possible to reduce the runoff that would have an impact on the neighborhood.
You can see here too that we're trying to really engage the streets. So for example, this is the first thing one sees in the development from the upland community. So we wanted to put retail, cafes, signify the welcomeness of the waterfront, do riparian plantings, rock gardens, while still elevating the site in order to make it friendly. And we think those two things can be done in a way that is compatible.
Next, please. The stormwater infiltration system is based on having infiltration gardens where the drainage actually is directed inward to these gardens where they will filter through the soil and into infiltration chambers. So we can actually handle a great deal of stormwater on the site. And that's in part due because we're raising the site up about 9 feet, and so we have ample volume to work with for stormwater.
People often ask me, you know, are we sort of, by elevating our site, pushing the water out onto the surrounding properties? And in fact, we're very specifically not doing that. We're elevating the site to take into account significant future climate change. We're elevating it more than is required by code and setting a higher standard than even what New York City requires, because we'd like to be an exemplary waterfront project. But then we're also acting as a sponge to kind of soak up as much of the stormwater as we can from the surrounding community in order to benefit the greater peninsula. Next.
And I think beyond the environmental goals, we've tried to embed the site with good social spaces and active recreation that respond to the community. Certainly the waterfront will provide a good bike trail for people with bicycle parking. We've worked with the Parks Department to provide outdoor exercise equipment because that's part of sort of the health and wellness part of the project. And working with the community board, we're putting in an overlook deck which actually projects out over the slope and gets people closer to the water, and it will be designed with picnic tables and barbecue grills, so it really would serve family events and gatherings and group activities like that, as well as the social seating that is typical of waterfronts.
I'd only add that I'd like to thank, you know, city planning, the Department of Parks, the local community board, you know, the councilwoman and the city council office, their own planner, because we received input from each of them at various stages. So we're presenting these as the ideas we've developed, but these really come from a whole series of different people. And, you know, we've had, you know, the privilege of being able to include these elements within the design through the process.
I would say many of the best ideas came from the community board and the Parks Department and the neighborhood. We actually incorporated them because they were the right thing to do, and they made a lot of sense.
So let's keep going. We don't want to take too much of your time. We want to answer your questions too. So
this is the overlook deck that we've provided, which provides a really great kind of access to the water, looking out over the waterfront, and in terms of active recreation with the family gathering, picnicking, and barbecue area.
You can see how we've elevated the site, but still created soft edges, this kind of wonderful feature that extends out, which is at a really special point. We'll show you renderings later. You can see the oyster gardens and even these kind of social spaces with these kind of green, grassy amphitheaters. Next.
So one of the challenges was really to deal with 3rd Street, the access to the waterfront. And we've heard very clearly and been responsive to making it as welcoming and accessible, having equity involved in getting to the waterfront. So we've treated the street really as part of the waterfront with a positive landscape that feels like the waterfront. And we've actually shortened the street up to wrap the waterfront around the corner of the development and closer to the neighborhood.
Furthermore, the map street is only 50 feet, and so we've convinced our client to actually electively widen the street, wider than is required. We've set
Actually,
it
we
back.
widened the sidewalks, but not the street.
That's right, so not the drive aisle, but the sidewalks. And you can see it represented in this view where there is wider sidewalks, extended tree pits, seating and benches that encourage people to linger. They're actually incorporated within the sidewalk area, as well as extensive what we call stoop gardens that activate the edges of the building, that have many entrances with kind of small stoops and gardens that actually represent, I think, the typologies that one sees in Queens and in New York City. Next. And we're going to kind of work our way into the waterfront.
And this is really the waterfront proper, where it really begins to open up and you get the kind of the full effect of seeing the waterfront and the bridges and the whole sound, if you will.
So the further in one comes, the buildings peel back even further. We set them back, we angle them to open up views, encourage people to come to the waterfront, provided extensive plantings. And I note that these are all required. These aren't just illustrative. Like the exact plans, of course, are vested with city planning if they're approved. And so literally every sidewalk, every rock, every planted area, you know, must be built as shown here. Next slide.
And this slide shows how we've actually wrapped the waterfront area around the building corner toward the south to actually bring the waterfront closer to 26th Avenue, to shorten up 3rd Street, to actually make the waterfront as close and accessible and welcoming as possible.
So I work directly with the New York City Fire Department. We minimize the lanes, as Ken said, to be just what is acceptable to the fire department in order to ensure the safe access of their staff. And then really we've worked to great lengths, including recent feedback, to maximize the amount of pedestrian area, greenery, the rock gardens, really communicate the openness of the waterfront, which we think has been essential, and the direction we've been giving by the community. Next.
And this then looks back toward the neighborhood, so you can see 3rd Street, you can see the entrance to the waterfront, you can see the terraced areas, the rain gardens, the diversity of native plant materials.
I love that I was like, Ken, what are the red trees? And he's like, those are tupelos that we're mixing in with the other trees. Like, we wanted a range of different experiences. We wanted to have different colors and different seasons. You know, it's not just for the warm weather. So we want to really show how we can make it as welcoming as possible. Next. And then this is really a larger view. So it shows really, you know, kind of the ensemble of all the buildings, all the open spaces, the resiliency features, and most importantly also how it connects to the surrounding areas, as I mentioned earlier, because we're very much about how can we connect into the historic Cove property next to it, which Ken also designed with us. How can we create the continuity of the waterfront where there's a whole range of different experiences, because over there we have get downs and a large playground, but then we added other elements such as the active recreation kind of features within this property. So we're really working hard to look at it, not just for this property, but how it ties to a greater extent into the surrounding community and certainly the peninsula as a whole. Next. And then the one thing I would leave you with here is just that there's also something a little bit magical about this site. This is a place where the waters of New York come together, where the Long Island Sound meets the Harlem River, meets the East River, the views of the bridges. It's a very special place, and so we'd like to create an astounding and special public park that we think is commensurate with the potential of this site, and create something that, you know, New Yorkers and the people of this community will love going forward. It's very important to us for this project, and we hope we've achieved that. Next. So then I think we have just some of the community benefits, and I'll let Rob speak to these issues.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Ken. Next slide, please. So as Jay said, I'm just going to run through probably the most important part of this project, which are the community benefits. The first one is brownfield remediation. This was one of the dirtiest sites in all the 5 boroughs, and in kind of an interesting and good move that the applicant made. They invested $16 million in the cleanup, which has already been done, and they did this before they even applied to the city for any type of approval. So they were very proactive about it. It shows how serious they are about this site and getting these things done. Next is the waterfront public space, which Jay and Ken just went through. Just high-level points. Again, 1.1 acres of beautiful space, unique design. It will be fully public and open to the public. Again, and that will be recorded in certain legal documents. It will have to be, and the applicant team will maintain it. Affordable housing, MIH option 1. No subsidies required from HPD, and in some of the later slides, I'll go a little bit deeper into that. Community facility and community serving retail. So as you saw in the presentation, there will be some retail on 26th Avenue as you approach the project, and the community facility spaces will be devoted to Urban Upbound and Zone 126. So they've been partners in this and helping us find space for them in the development. And finally, resiliency. The project will be lifted 9 feet. Ken went through a little bit of how beneficial that will be to his design of the waterfront area, but again, it will also protect not only the site, but the surrounding area from coastal flooding. Next slide, please. So brownfield remediation. On the left, the left column, you can see how the site looked a few years ago before the remediation was done. You can see the barrels that were collected. There were PCBs and pesticides on the site. Again, the applicant invested $16 million before anything was asked of the city to try and clean up the site. And on the right now, you can see basically the after what's been done. So hopefully all that soil and sawdust that you see will be Waterfront Park. Next slide, please. On sustainability, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. Based on a comment from the community board and working with the community board, the applicant is looking into geothermal energy, which will hopefully reduce reliance on fossil fuels in the building. I know Jay and his team are working actually on a building in, I believe, Brooklyn right now, and he could probably speak more to that, but where he's pursuing this exact thing.
So we've succeeded for, a rental residential building, a collection of buildings, in doing the largest geothermal project in New York City's history. It's under construction, the wells have been drilled, and we think it's cost effective, and we'd love to do that here. So we would have to investigate the hydrology of the site, which we're doing, but we think this is an extraordinary opportunity to do a level of sustainability and to affect, future climate change in a way that, hasn't been done and on a scale that hasn't been done before. The number 2 project is St. Patrick's Cathedral, and our project is twice as large and already underway. So we're going to make a good shot at doing it here because I think the site would be good for it.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Jay. So on unit mix, I think this slide actually shows the benefit of early community engagement and the cooperation that the applicant has had with the community board specifically. In the old plan column, you can see what was originally proposed, and that was a high number of 1 bedrooms and fewer 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. And based on the applicant's engagement with the community board and their recommendation and their request that we add 2 and 3 bedrooms, the applicant actually doubled the amount in the proposal, the plan right now, doubled the amount of 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms to add those units to the project. So the new plan column is what is proposed in terms of unit mix today. Next slide, please. And on affordable housing, and this goes further to what Councilmember Caban said earlier, on the left you can see what the applicant started with, which is MIH option 1. 25% of the residential floor area must be provided at an average of 60% of AMI. So you can see 134 units at 40% of AMI, 67 units at 60% of AMI, 134 units at 80% of AMI. In speaking with the council member, and we hope to continue working with her, the applicant has committed to lowering the lowest affordability tranche. So going from 40% AMI to 30% AMI, and doing this without utilizing the deep affordability option, which actually provides fewer affordable units. This will still be the same number of units, 134, 67, and 134. The big difference being that the 80% AMI will go to 90, but the 40% will go to 30% of AMI. And as I said, we hope to continue working with the council member on this.
The only other element one might add is that it's also being done without HPD subsidy.
Yes. Next slide, please. And finally, community facility and retail, just to, again, high-level highlights here, because it is an important part of the project. There's going to be about $600 million invested in the neighborhood through this project. Urban Upbound, a partner in the project, is going to install a job incubator on the site. That is their intent, and that will help with job training and small business development for the local community. And I believe he'll be able to speak about that a little later. And the project itself should generate about 500 new neighborhood job opportunities. So we're excited about that, and I believe that is the end of our presentation. So thank you for letting us present, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll ask a few questions before I pass over to Councilmember Caban. Have you explored the possibility of having an early childhood education facility on this site? Has the development team or SCA identified alternative sites that will be viable for an early childhood education facility if it is not located within the development?
Sure, yeah, so there have been conversations with the SA about that, about doing it on site. I think those conversations are still going on, and it's part of the environmental mitigation that's part of the project. So I think that's definitely in the talks. It's definitely been discussed, but those are still ongoing.
Thank you. This project will add a lot of people, approximately up to 3,713. Please explain why you believe the park renovation you propose for the Tri-Borough Playground B is sufficient mitigation for the expected impact.
Sure, and I may defer to Ken a little bit on this because I know he's helped design it. And actually, Ken, why don't you just explain a little bit on what will go into that design?
Sure. Playground B is about half underneath the elevated highway, and the other half is open air. And right now, there's sport courts underneath the elevated highway, which are in a pretty good shape. But the area that's open to the sky has a children's playground area, which is actually not in very good condition. It's not a really state-of-the-art playground. And Playground B also has stormwater issues in that there's one small drain for the entire site. And so what we're proposing is to develop, again, rain gardens to help with the infiltration, reduce the stormwater going into the neighborhood, and to completely rebuild the children's playground areas to a much higher standard, which will significantly increase, I think, the benefit to the community and upgrade that facility.
And I'll just add that on top of that, and the design that you propose is great, there is also obviously the 1.1 acres that we're doing directly on site. That will be a more direct benefit for the immediate community.
Have you considered additional improvements of other public spaces, particularly on the Astoria Houses campus?
Yeah, so, and I know Jay in the past has actually worked on the Astoria Houses campus and proposed improvements there, and I know it is something that we've looked into, and I believe some of those conversations are still ongoing, but the focus on the on-site improvements in Tri-Borough Park, those are more related to the legal requirements. The Astoria Houses improvements, I think, are more community-oriented improvements that the applicant is interested in.
Right, it's a little tricky because when we do mitigation, we don't get to choose the site, as it were. It's designated under various legal constraints. But I can say, you know, as someone who has had the privilege of working with this community, that several of the other projects that we've done have already committed to significant improvements, including within Astoria Houses, where, you know, we know many of the residents and their leadership and have worked with them much in the past. So previous projects that we've done that have already committed to improvements there include significant upgrades to the entire Esplanade, which actually did suffer somewhat under Sandy, improvements to an area where they have their rubbish and trash collection, which is quite complex because it's tied into the larger infrastructure of the NYCHA campus, improvements to the streetscape, including the restoration of Astoria Boulevard and bringing that back through in order to create more activity and connectivity through the campus. And finally, we've already approved the location of 2 schools that have been actually worked out and approved on the NYCHA campus, as well as 2 affordable buildings, buildings with affordable housing, including one that's under construction today. So those aren't part of this project because, as we said, we don't get to choose, as it were, the mitigation that's kind of chosen for us. But I know my firm and I personally have been a passionate advocate trying to make improvements to the NYCHA campus, and all the things I mentioned to you are already approved and, planned over the next coming years.
And the applicant is in close contact with the Astoria houses, the whole group, throughout the whole process they have been, so there's a good line of communication there between them.
Thank you. And can you guys just talk right into the mic, because it's kind of hard hearing you.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
And lastly, before I turn over to Councilmember Caban, can you please describe your discussions with MTA New York City Transit about potential station improvements at 30th Avenue?
Sure. So, not really loud. And I think Jason's on the line too, so he may be able to talk more about the technical specifics. But there's been a lot of focus on the applicant team about how we're going to deal with usage of the MTA subway stops. And actually, I don't know if it was said during the presentation, but there are going to be shuttle buses that are going to take people from the site to the closest MTA station, I believe 30th Avenue, to help with that. But we worked very closely with the MTA on the 30th Avenue subway station to see what was feasible in terms of possibly doing something there to improve the station. And I believe it was ultimately determined that the improvements would not be feasible, at least at this time, to make the specific improvements that were identified in the FEIS.
Thank you. That's the end of my question. I will now turn it over to Councilmember Caban.
Thank you. Before I start with my questioning, I actually want to lead with a request. As far as I can tell, you haven't shown renderings from the 26th Ave 3rd Street side, except that one that's looking up the driveway. And so it would be really great if y'all could provide that.
Thank you. We'll be happy to do that.
Great, thank you. And then I know that you showed it in the slide, but in terms of, can you just break down very quickly the unit mix income target for the proposed affordable units and estimated rent? If you could throw that back up there, that would be great. And then, when do you expect these units to come online, and how many will be constructed in each phase of the development?
Sure. So first, you said the unit mix, I believe you said, right? So I don't know if we could put it back up, but I could say it out loud. 1 bedrooms is approximately 950 units, 2 bedrooms approximately 315, and 3 bedrooms approximately 75.
And so looking at I guess combining my questions, looking at those numbers, can you talk a little bit about when you expect those units to come online and how many will be constructed in each phase of the development?
So in each phase of the development, let's see if I have that information. Here it is.
If you have the breakdown by building, I can.
Yeah, if you have it.
I can. I don't have it. That's a little rounded off, but yeah. But okay. So, sorry, we're just trying to, I'll give you the approximate number, and then, of course, we can follow up with a more precise number.
Great.
So, the first building to be built, we call Building 1, which would be the furthest upland. So that's the first building, which faces directly onto 26th Avenue and 3rd Street. So that would be the first one, and that is approximately 300 units, a little bit less than that, but around there. The second building is, and although that's the first building that's the most upland, in discussions with city planning, the public space component would have to be planned from the beginning. So we include significant portions of 3rd Street and part of the waterfront from the beginning in phase 1, even though that's the most upland building, and frankly, the smallest building. So there's a significant part of the open space, as well as the units committed to in phase 1. In phase 2, we're showing approximately 450 units. Again, we'll give you the exact number afterwards if we can, just so I make sure I do it accurately. And so that's the second building, which is more positioned within 3rd Street. So it's within the center of the project, if you will. The third building is the furthest to the north, and that one would also be about 450 units. And so that would happen third. And then each one has commensurate areas of additional public space that are part of it, because also we need some staging area for construction in order to not bother residents who are living there. We need area for equipment and so forth, and so we've worked that out. But even though we do require staging for construction, very important, so you don't disturb people who are living there, you at least minimize the disturbance, that we have included significant areas of the public parks and open space in each phase, including kind of front-loading it to a degree so that it's there from the beginning of the project.
Thank you. Chair, may I continue?
Yes.
Thank you. How are you going to ensure that local NYCHA residents are promptly made aware of the new housing opportunities in your buildings?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I had trouble hearing you.
How will you ensure that local NYCHA residents are promptly made aware of the new housing opportunities in your buildings?
In the new building. So the applicant, I know they're going to work, they're going to continue to work within the community to make that information available. The only thing I'll say, and I'm not an expert on this, so I apologize if I misspeak, but the affordable units, I believe, are done on a lottery basis. So while there will be an effort, obviously, to let the Astoria Houses campus know that this is available, it's not something that the applicant or the owner picks. It will be done on a lottery basis.
Right, but you will have some sort of a process in terms of proactive outreach
Absolutely.
to let,
Sorry.
particularly the NYCHA residents, know that they have this option.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. I think I'm going to leave it there on sort of the affordability questions that I have, but I will say that I do look forward to working with y'all on additional improvements to the affordability options. I obviously said time and time again that is the #1 priority. But I want to move a little bit into sort of the site design and the public space. While the zoning requires open space on the site to be public, we've seen that waterfront open space can often feel disconnected from other public space and unwelcoming. I know that you addressed some of that in your presentation. I will name again that I can't support this development without assurances that the public's open space will be accessible, inclusive, and usable for the public. So questions related to that are what hours will the waterfront open space be open? And if not 24/7, how is it going to be closed off?
Sure. So just to address that, the hours will be from 6 a.m. to 1 a.m., and that will be that is actually in the agreement with the Parks Department, so that is it will be a requirement, and that will be recorded against the property. In terms of how the park will be closed, I'm not sure on the details of that, but I would assume there will be, I'm sure they'll work with you, Ken, to help design something that'll be both beautiful and secure for the area, whether it be a gate or something like that during the hours of,
Well, actually, we could add to that. The New York City generally has a standard, I believe it's called the Open Park Standard. So it's meant to not really gate parks. So the park would be, closed in the late evening for, security purposes. But in fact, there is no barrier, no gate, no physical barrier. And as a matter of fact, we've tried very hard through the design itself to not only, prevent barriers and make the park fully accessible, but in fact to just visually project the notion of openness and publicness, and to make sure that the design itself has all those clues and readings that make normal people feel that it's welcoming and accessible. So we've tried very hard to do that, and welcome any input on that, but that's absolutely been our goal.
And again, in our conversations, I've also brought up concerns about surveillance, about the functioning and reach of security or privacy. Do you have plans for private security on the site? If so, what are they? And what also, in addition to what kind of signage about public use of the open space will be posted?
So there is signage that, again, will be legally required to be placed in the open areas at the entrance of the park and within it. That will make very clear what the hours of operation for the park are, and that it will be a public space, and it'll have the same signage that all public open spaces have in the city. So that'll be very clear. And then in terms of surveillance, or I guess security, it's something that I know the applicant is taking very seriously, and how that will be done. And their priority is to make sure that this space is going to be beautiful for the people that live there, but also openly accessible to everyone in the community. So there will be no, everything will be open and accessible completely, and they'll make sure that the area is safe within standards of what the Parks Department wants.
Okay, but specifically, do you have any plans for private security on the site?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you have any plans for private security on the site?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. In Gowanus, the DCP deliberately required active uses on the canal waterfront to increase the public use of the space. Have you looked at adding active ground floor uses on the waterfront in the development?
That's a great question. So first of all, we really support retail in general wherever we can. It's tricky doing retail on the waterfront, and I've had many discussions with the community and with city planning because we've had the benefit of working on the peninsula as a whole, and the peninsula really needs more retail. We've planned a whole series of retail corridors, including some things that have been built, which are mostly 26th Avenue, as well as portions of the future 4th Street, which isn't built, and a portion of the waterfront at Astoria Cove, because it has enough critical mass that we think it can support retail. Unfortunately, we didn't think that the waterfront on our site would support retail. The client's not against it, because retail, is a great use, so it's not a financial decision at all. It's more of a practical planning decision, like, will the retail do well? So because we felt retail wouldn't do well, unfortunately, I'd reference certain sites such as Brooklyn Bridge Park, for example, where we did the retail at Empire Stores, which supports the park, but at other locations further away where it doesn't have critical mass, it's failed and been empty. So what we did instead, in response to your question, is we created community facilities, all active edges. We don't want it to feel private, but we want, as Jane Jacobs taught us, eyes on the street. And so throughout the entire project, we either have retail, we have lobbies, we have residences where we actually created kind of townhome type residences that have stoops and gardens that face directly into the street, like a classic Queens neighborhood. And finally, on the waterfront park, we've also included some areas where we have the community facility, some of which aren't designated yet for a user. And so that's something that could be the source of potential future conversations, but that will activate the edge and make it feel public. So we've gone to great lengths to try to achieve that goal.
Okay, Chair, I believe I just have one more question. I've asked you to share your designs for green infrastructure and shoreline plantings, including the salt marsh grasses, as well as your maintenance plans. Can you please provide those details?
Yeah, the salt marsh that we're proposing, the salt marsh that's proposing is an existing shelf at the existing water level, and then then we're building up the area above that. And so we're following the Parks Department standards for the types of plantings that would naturally grow in that at that elevation, and the owner will have a maintenance agreement with an ecological service that would provide the ongoing maintenance for it.
I think we could add too, though, because I remember the councilwoman requested this. So Ken, you put together the drawings with the DEP standards. It's actually required by the Department of Environmental Protection. And Ken actually showed how the design conforms to the DEP, regulates how you can make sure that salt marshes and rain gardens and so forth work effectively. And I believe we've forwarded that to the councilwoman's office, or we could do that again. We're happy to provide that.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Caban. There being no other further questions for this applicant panel, this panel is now excused. Council, are there any members of the public who wish to testify on the Hallett's North proposal?
Yes, Chair Riley. We'll first hear from members of the public currently here in the room. The first panel of witnesses will include the Reverend Hassan Clark, Carlos Cano, and Victoria Kammer. If you are all here, please come forward.
Members of the public will be given 2 minutes to speak. Please do not begin until the Sergeant at Arms has started the clock. Sergeant, you may begin. You may begin.
Good afternoon, New York City Council. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mrs. Councilwoman. My name is Pastor Hassan Clark. I'm the senior pastor of the Center of Hope International in Long Island City, New York. I would like to express my unwavering support for the Hallett's North project. The Hallett's North team has been in constant communication with the local clergy and community members for the last few years and has made many efforts to keep us engaged and informed throughout this project. Beyond the new affordable housing and job opportunities, this project will offer new community space for Urban Upbound and Zone 126, two organizations which have done an incredible work in our community for over the last 15 years. I trust that this partnership will bring valuable resources to the residents of Astoria who need it and allow these organizations to continue to support our community. Urban Upbound has several businesses in Astoria already, and in the business innovation space truly sets this apart from other projects in the area. I have faith in this project, and it will aid in the creation of many more small businesses fueled by our local aspiring entrepreneurs. I support the Howlett North project and ask that you do the same. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Cano, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Urban Upbound. I'm speaking today on behalf in support of the Howlett North project. Urban Upbound is a community-based organization dedicated to breaking cycles of poverty in public housing and other low-income communities. In our Astoria office, we provide a suite of integrated programs rooted in the Just Plus model, such as employment opportunities, job training, one-on-one financial counseling, start-to-finish tax filing, mental health services, and small business and worker co-op incubation. These programs directly benefit the residents of Astoria houses and other underserved families in the peninsula. Unfortunately, the state of our Astoria office itself often creates barriers that disrupt or impede our ability to deliver services. Thanks to the Howlett North project, Urban Upbound will have an opportunity to finally escape the limitations of our current aging infrastructure and continue to offer vital services. This will be made possible through access to a new office in the proposed development, from where we'll run an economic incubator that will develop cooperatively owned businesses and employment opportunities, connecting local residents to these good jobs. I would like to highlight that beyond the benefit of this new space, which comes at not cost to our organization and adds up to an investment of $1 million over 10 years, the developer has listened to our needs and they have worked with us in creating an innovative, smart design that our staff and those we serve can be proud of and inspired in. Moreover, we will manage a brand new community space within the new development, also at no cost. Named after longtime Astoria Houses community activist and leader, Ms. Claudia Koger, this state-of-the-art community space will allow smaller community-based organizations to provide intergenerational programming for the residents of Astoria Houses and the surrounding communities. From these spaces, in partnership with Zone 126, Urban Upbound will manage and provide the services the community deserves.
You could continue.
Thank you. With funding support from the developer, Astoria North is making this all possible. Thank you so much for listening to my testimony.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Kammer, and I'll be reading today on behalf of Pastor Gilbert Pickett, who's a strong supporter of this project, but unfortunately couldn't be here today. My name is Pastor Gilbert Pickett Sr., and I am the moderator of the Eastern Baptist Association, an association of 120 churches primarily in Queens, Kings, Nassau, and Suffolk counties. I am also the senior pastor of the Mount Baptist Church in Corona, as well as a lifelong resident of Queens. I speak today in support of the Howlett North project because it brings new housing and investment to an underserved community where many of my congregates I represent live. I recognize that the housing crisis and disinvestment is not limited to Astoria, but this area is in critical need of new development and housing. This rezoning will improve the quality of life for the whole community by creating new affordable housing options, new places to shop and work, and access to the waterfront. The 300-plus affordable apartments will benefit the community where high-quality, affordable housing resources are scarce. It will further benefit the community by bringing local retail and restaurants for the new residents of the building, existing area residents, and visitors to the surrounding area. The permanent jobs will support local employment and boost our local economy. Please accept this testimony as my support for the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Caban, you have a question for this panel?
No, just thank you for coming out and providing your testimony.
Thank you.
The next panel will include Dr. Anju Rapchandani, Pastor Corwin Mason, Claudia Koger. If you are all here, please come forward. Dr. Rapchandani, then Pastor Corwin Mason, then Claudia Koger.
You may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Andrew J. Rapchandani, and I'm the proud executive director of Zone 126. I'm here to express my support today in favor of this project. I'm addressing you today from a very unique perspective. I'm someone who's grown up in Astoria and Long Island City, and I have the privilege of running a nonprofit organization here. My family moved here close to 40 years ago, and I've been fortunate enough to attend great local public schools within walking distance of my home. Now that I have the privilege to lead an organization that's from cradle to college to career, supporting children and families specifically in NYCHA, Astoria Houses, Ravenswood Houses, and Queensbridge Houses through partnerships and collaborations, I couldn't be more excited for a project like this to support our needs for children and families through partnerships around college and career readiness, workforce development, literacy, STEM, mental health, college counseling, and much more for our children in the area. I know all too well what it's like to grow up in poverty where my family did not have equal opportunities. And so I often ask myself the question, what role can new development play here in the area in terms of addressing longstanding inequities? I have had numerous conversations with the development team, and I wholeheartedly believe that they plan to address a lot of the community's challenges that have further been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. I truly believe we'll create opportunities to provide the support needed for many of our neighbors. I have to commend the team for their continuous efforts to engage with the community to develop a project that not only supports the local residents, but longstanding trusted partners like Urban Upbound as well as Zone 126 that are going to provide all of these activities to support our local historians. I here at Zone 126 today am in support of this project so that we can support local hiring opportunities for minorities and women of color like myself alongside with Urban Upbound. They're paving the way for us to do so, and we need to support this project. I hope that everyone will figure out a way to expedite this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Community Council. I'm Pastor Cohen S. Mason, Senior Pastor of the Community Church of Astoria, and I thank you for allowing me to speak today. As an advocate for my community, I'm always looking for projects that will bring truly affordable options to our residents. New affordable housing in Western Queens is not a desire, but rather a need. Many NYCHA residents are living in substandard conditions where they are constantly overlooked and grossly undeserved. Affordable housing is incredibly limited, leaving many residents with no way out of the NYCHA cycle. I'm here today to express my support for the Hallett's North project. This development will bring much-needed housing, new jobs, and a community space to benefit residents of all ages. This project is a glimpse of hope for thousands of Astoria residents seeking new affordable housing. Offering 300-plus affordable housing units will make a major impact in our community. I strongly believe that this project is a step in the right direction, working with reliable nonprofit partners like Urban Upbound to ensure local hiring and job training. Please accept this testimony as my support for the rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. You may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Claudia Coger, and I've been a resident of Astoria Houses for over 60 years. And am a former president of Astoria Houses for many years, this tenants association. I'm a tireless advocate for social welfare, education, and tenants' rights in the Astoria community. As an advocate for my community, I speak today in support of the Hallett's North project because it will bring new investment resources and affordable housing options to our neighborhood. For the past 2 years, Hallett North has proven to be a true community partner and has shown a vested interest in our neighborhood. This is beyond a simple promise for affordable housing in a new building. The Hallett North team has been on the grounds talking to the residents, hearing our opinions, and lending support when we were in the most need. Throughout the pandemic, the Hallett North team played an instrumental role in the food distribution happening daily in Astoria Houses. In October of 2020, a severe gas leak in Astoria Houses left residents without a gas for their stoves for many months. Hallett's North partnered with the Astoria Tenants Association to distribute 21 consecutive days of hot meals to the residents. Whether it was food distribution, holiday gifts for the children, turkeys for Thanksgiving, when we needed support, Hallett North was there for us. I look forward to continued conversation with the development team to how this project can benefit the residents of Astoria Houses who live just minutes away from the proposed project. I'm excited that our community will have new programming and access to the waterfront. I have faith this team will do right by our community and know this will be a fruitful partnership. And I appreciate today that we sit in the presence of our Councilwoman Tiffany Capone, who's in support and ever on the grounds with us in Astoria Houses. And we ask you, please, to accept this testimony and my support for the rezoning. Thank you for your time and consideration in this important request.
Thank you so much.
And
Councilmember
again, I
Brown.
just want to say thank you, and also it's always good to see y'all.
Thank you.
If there are any other members of the public with us in the room who wish to testify, please once again see a Sergeant at Arms. Complete a speaker card, and then we will take your testimony. At this time, we will take remote testimony from one witness at this time, Anna Ortega. Do we have Anna Ortega?
Starting time.
Anna, are you there?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon, Committee Chair Riley and Committee. My name is Anna Ortega, and I am a member of 32BJ. I am 15-year resident of Queens. I am here this afternoon on behalf of 32BJ's 85,000 members in New York City. We are the essential workers that keep the buildings in city running, residential building workers, janitors, security officers, and other vital roles in the property services sector. We are pleased to express our support for Hallett's North rezoning. 32BJ supports responsible development that invests in and benefits our communities. Importantly, the creation of good family-sustaining jobs. I am happy to report that the developers of this project reached out to the union early in the process and made an incredible commitment to creating prevailing wage building service jobs at this site. We estimate 17 building service workers who will permanently staff the site. These jobs will come with not only fair wages that meet the industry standard, but also qualify affordable health insurance and other meaningful benefits like pay time. We know that members of the local community typically fill jobs like this. We are also pleased to see that 350 of 1,400 residential units on the project will be affordable housing in accordance with the mandatory inclusionary housing program. This will bring a greatly needed increase in the supply of affordable units for working people in Queens. With the combined commitment to good jobs and affordable units, this project will bring the opportunity for upward mobility and security to working class families. The community board has approved the project. The borough president has issued their support, and the city planning commission has approved it. I respectfully urge the committee to approve the rezoning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Anna.
Chair Riley, that is it for public witnesses registered and present at this time. I'll remind the viewing public and anyone else with us today that written testimony may be submitted via email to landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov. landusetestimony@council.nyc.gov.
Thank you, Council. Councilmember Kavan, you have anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. There being no other members of the public who wish to testify on preconsidered LUs related to the ULURP numbers C220196, ZMQ, and N220197, ZRQ, relating to the Hallett's North rezoning proposal, the public hearing is now closed and the items are laid over. That concludes today's business. I would like to thank the members of the public, my colleagues, subcommittee council, land use and other council staff, and the Sergeant at Arms for participating in today's meeting. This meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you.